I am Lily Bennett, 32, and my entire life I felt like an outsider in my own family. My sister Madison always had a way of making me feel different, less than. She would tease me about my dark hair and olive skin that contrasted sharply with her blonde locks and fair complexion. Little did either of us know that her cruel birthday gift of a DNA test, meant to mock me in front of our entire family, would uncover a secret buried for over 3 decades. The results would shatter the foundation of everything we thought we knew about our family. Before I dive into how my sister's cruel joke turned our family upside down, let me know where you are watching from. Drop a comment, like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family secrets that were never meant to be revealed. Growing up in the Bennett household meant living in Madison's shadow. Our family consisted of my father Robert, a successful attorney with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes, my mother Eleanor, a poised homemaker with golden blonde hair and a perfect smile, my sister Madison, 2 years older than me and seemingly perfect in every way, and then there was me, Lily, the odd one out. While the rest of my family shared the same fair skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes, I had always been different. My olive complexion, dark brown hair, and hazel eyes made me look like I had been plucked from another family entirely. When I was 8 years old, Madison, then 10, first planted the seed of doubt in my mind. "You know you don't really belong here, right?" she whispered during a family photo session. "Mom and Dad probably found you on the doorstep." I ran to my mother crying, but she simply brushed it off. "Don't be silly, Lily. Those are just recessive genes from your great-grandmother. Madison, apologize to your sister." Madison mumbled an apology, but the smirk never left her face. From that day forward, she found subtle ways to remind me that I didn't quite fit. As we grew up, the differences between us became more pronounced. Madison was the golden child, captain of the cheerleading squad, straight-A student, homecoming queen, and our parents' obvious pride and joy. She had a natural confidence that drew people to her, making her the center of attention at every family gathering. I, on the other hand, was quieter and more introspective. I found solace in photography and art, spending hours in my room or wandering through parks capturing images rather than attending the social events Madison thrived in. My parents never quite understood my artistic inclinations, viewing them as a phase rather than a passion. "Lily, why don't you try out for volleyball like your sister did?" my father would suggest. "You spend too much time alone with that camera." At family reunions, relatives would fawn over Madison's achievements while struggling to find something to discuss with me. "Still taking pictures, huh?" was the extent of most conversations before they drifted back to Madison's latest accomplishment. Our neighbor Mrs. Peterson once made the mistake of commenting on our differences during a backyard barbecue when I was 12. "It's fascinating how different siblings can be. Lily doesn't look much like the rest of you, does she?" The awkward silence that followed was broken by my father clearing his throat and quickly changing the subject. Later that night, I overheard my parents arguing in hushed tones, something about people should mind their own business and she's just as much our daughter. I dismissed it as parental frustration with nosy neighbors, but the memory lingered. Throughout high school, Madison's behavior toward me grew increasingly competitive. When I finally found my niche in the photography club and won a local contest, Madison suddenly developed an interest in photography, borrowing my camera without permission and signing up for the same classes. "I just want to spend more time with my little sister," she told our parents, who praised her for being so inclusive. But when we were alone, she would make comments like, "Don't get too excited about your little hobby. I'll probably end up being better at it anyway." By the time I graduated high school, I had developed a thick skin but also deep-seated insecurities. I worked hard to please my parents, hoping to earn the same admiration they showed Madison, but it always seemed just out of reach. Even when I received a partial scholarship to study photography at a respected art school, my achievement was overshadowed by Madison's acceptance to an Ivy League university with a real degree program, as my father put it. Our family friends, the Carters, whose son Michael would later become my boyfriend, were among the few who seemed to notice the unfair dynamic. Michael's mother once pulled me aside at a graduation party and said, "You know, Lily, your photography shows such a unique perspective. You see the world differently than your family, and that's a gift, not a flaw. Her words were a rare validation in a childhood filled with feeling like an afterthought. Still, despite all the signs and occasional comments from outsiders, I never seriously questioned my place in the family. I attributed my differences to genetic quirks and my feelings of alienation to normal sibling rivalry and my own insecurities. I had no idea that the truth was far more complicated than I could have imagined. Fast forward to adulthood. At 32, I had built a modest but fulfilling career as a freelance photographer, specializing in nature and architectural shots for local magazines and businesses. I lived in a small but charming apartment in the artistic district of our city, decorated with my photographs and vintage finds. It wasn't the life my parents had envisioned for me, but it was mine, and I had fought hard for the independence it represented. Madison, now 34, had followed the path my parents had always dreamed of. After graduating from her prestigious university, she had climbed the corporate ladder to become a marketing executive at a Fortune 500 company. She had married James Cooper, a successful investment banker from a wealthy family, and they lived in a sprawling suburban home that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Their 2 children, Emma and Ethan, ages 7 and 5, were already enrolled in private school and a multitude of enrichment activities. On paper, Madison had the perfect life. And she never missed an opportunity to remind me of it. Family gatherings had become an exercise in endurance. Last Easter, as we sat around my parents' dining table, Madison dominated the conversation with stories about her recent promotion and family vacation to the Maldives. "We're thinking of buying a vacation home in the Hamptons," she announced, cutting into her ham. "James's bonus this year was quite generous." She turned to me with a practiced look of concern. "How's the photography business, Lily? Are you getting enough clients to make ends meet these days?" Before I could answer, she continued, "You know, our company is looking for an in-house photographer. It doesn't pay what we give our executives, of course, but it would be stable. I could put in a good word if you're interested in a real job." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "That's so thoughtful of you, Madison." "Isn't that thoughtful, Robert?" My father agreed. "You should consider it, Lily. Benefits are important. You're not getting any younger, you know." I forced a smile. "Thanks, but I'm doing fine. I just booked a major project with the city for their new tourism campaign." Madison's smile tightened slightly. "Well, that's nice. A local project. Speaking of local, how's Michael doing? Are you two still together?" The question was a deliberate jab. Madison knew perfectly well that Michael and I had broken up 3 months prior after 5 years together. He had cited commitment issues and my inability to truly let people in as reasons for ending our relationship. The breakup had been painful, especially since our families were friends and I still ran into him occasionally. "We decided to part ways," I said simply, taking a large sip of wine. "It wasn't working out." "Such a shame," Madison said with exaggerated sympathy. "He was such a catch. Successful doctor, good family. I was sure he was going to propose any day." My mother sighed. "I was looking forward to planning your wedding. Madison's was so beautiful, remember? The roses alone cost." "I remember, Mom," I interrupted. "You have the photo album on the coffee table." The conversation shifted to my parents' upcoming anniversary trip, but the damage was done. Once again, I was the disappointment, the daughter who couldn't quite get her life together in the way they understood. Later that evening, as I was helping clean up in the kitchen, Madison cornered me by the dishwasher. "You know," she said in a low voice, "if you ever want advice on how to keep a man interested, I'm happy to help. Not everyone can juggle a career and relationship like I do, but I'm sure you could learn." I set down the plate I was rinsing with deliberate care. "Madison, I don't need relationship advice from you. Michael and I had issues that had nothing to do with my career or your definition of success." She raised an eyebrow. "Clearly you need some kind of advice." 32, single, renting instead of owning, working gig to gig. "Mom and Dad worry about you, you know." They wonder if you'll ever settle down and give them more grandchildren. Before I could respond, our mother walked in, and Madison's expression instantly transformed into a smile. I was just telling Lily she should come over for dinner next week. The kids miss their aunt. The Christmas before my 32nd birthday was particularly difficult. Madison arrived with a car full of expensive gifts and spent the evening detailing the exclusive preschool where Ethan had been accepted and the ballet company that had scouted Emma. When it was time to open presents, she made a show of the designer handbag she'd bought for our mother and the rare scotch for our father. My gift to them, a framed series of black and white photographs I had taken of their childhood home and neighborhood, was met with polite thanks but none of the enthusiasm they showed for Madison's presents. My sister's gift to me was a self-help book titled Finding Your Path to Success After 30, which she presented with the comment, "I thought this might help you figure things out." My therapist, whom I had started seeing after the breakup with Michael, had suggested setting firmer boundaries with my family, particularly Madison. Limited contact might be healthy, she advised during our session after the holidays. Some family dynamics are too entrenched to change from within. But something in me resisted the idea of distancing myself. Despite everything, they were my family, the only one I had. And beneath my resentment of Madison was a lingering desire for the sisterly bond one had always craved as a child. So I continued to show up for family events, call my parents weekly, and endure Madison's thinly veiled competition and criticism, all while telling myself that family was worth the emotional toll. I had no idea that the foundation of that family was built on a secret that was about to come crashing down around us all. My 32nd birthday fell on a Sunday, and as usual, my parents insisted on hosting a dinner at their house. I would have preferred a quiet evening with friends or even alone with a good book and a glass of wine, but refusing would have caused more drama than it was worth. So I arrived at 6 o'clock, a bottle of wine in hand and a practiced smile on my face. The table was set with the good china, and my mother had prepared my favorite meal from childhood, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes. My father greeted me with a quick hug and handed me a small, wrapped package containing a gift card to my favorite bookstore. It was impersonal but practical, and I thanked him sincerely. We were halfway through dinner, making stilted conversation about the unseasonably warm weather, when the doorbell rang. My mother looked up in surprise. Who could that be? The answer came in the form of Madison's voice calling out from the hallway. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare, and then I had to stop for your gift, Lily. She swept into the dining room in a designer dress, not a hair out of place despite her claims of a rushed journey. James followed behind with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, likely annoyed at being dragged to yet another family obligation. Madison. We weren't sure you were coming, my mother exclaimed, jumping up to hug her. And miss my little sister's birthday? Never. Madison placed a large, elaborately wrapped box on the table directly in front of me, nearly knocking over my wine glass. Open it now, Lily. I can't wait to see your face. The room fell silent as I carefully unwrapped the package, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. Madison's gifts were never truly for the recipient but rather carefully calculated statements about herself or subtle digs at the recipient's insecurities. Inside the box was an ancestry DNA test kit, complete with a saliva collection tube and return shipping materials. I stared at it, momentarily confused. It's a DNA test. Madison announced unnecessarily, clapping her hands together. Isn't it perfect? I thought we should finally figure out where you really came from. She laughed as though she'd made a harmless joke. What do you mean, where I came from? I asked quietly. Madison waved a dismissive hand. Oh, because you look so different from the rest of us. Maybe you'll discover some exotic heritage to explain that complexion. Or maybe, she lowered her voice to a theatrical whisper, you'll find your real family. My father choked slightly on his wine, and my mother let out a strained laugh. Madison, what a unique gift. I thought it was clever, Madison continued, helping herself to a generous portion of food. Everyone's doing these tests now. I already did one last month, and I'm basically exactly what we thought, mostly British and German, just like Mom and Dad. But Lily, she gestured at me with her fork, has always been our little mystery. I forced myself to smile, though I felt as though I'd been slapped. Thanks, Madison. Very thoughtful. James, looking uncomfortable, attempted to change the subject, but Madison kept circling back to the DNA test, suggesting increasingly outlandish possibilities for my true heritage throughout the remainder of the dinner. By the time I left that night, the DNA kit felt like it was burning a hole through my purse. I considered throwing it away. Giving Madison's cruelty any attention seemed like a mistake. But something stopped me. A lifetime of feeling different, of subtle comments and awkward silences when comparisons were made between me and the rest of my family. The way my father sometimes looked at me with an unreadable expression when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The next day, I called my best friend Allison and told her about the gift. What a witch, Allison said bluntly. She had never been a fan of Madison. Throw it away and forget about it. That's what I was thinking, I agreed. It's just another way for her to emphasize how I don't belong. Allison was quiet for a moment. Unless what? Well, have you ever seriously considered that there might be something they're not telling you? I mean, you really don't look like any of them, Lily. That's just genetics being weird, I said automatically, repeating what I'd been told my entire life. Maybe, Allison conceded. But if you do the test, at least you'll know for sure. And imagine Madison's face if it turns out you're exactly the same mix as the rest of them. You could finally shut her up about being different. The thought was tempting. After a lifetime of comments and insinuations, scientific proof that I was just as much a Bennett as Madison would be deeply satisfying. So on a Tuesday evening after a long photo shoot, I sat at my kitchen table, read through the instructions, and spit into the little tube. I sealed it up, filled out the paperwork, and dropped it in the mail the next morning. According to the company, results would take approximately 4 to 6 weeks. As the days passed, I found myself thinking about the test more often than I cared to admit. I imagined various scenarios, discovering some unexpected heritage that would explain my appearance, confirming that I was indeed exactly the same mix as Madison, or even finding distant relatives I never knew about. But the possibility that had begun to grow in the back of my mind, that I might not be biologically related to my family at all, was one I refused to seriously consider. When I was 16, I had once directly asked my mother about our family heritage, prompted by a school assignment on ancestry. Why don't I look like you or Dad or Madison? I had asked, trying to sound casual. My mother had been folding laundry and didn't look up. You take after my grandmother Sophia. She was darker complected too. Do you have photos of her? For my project? A brief pause in the folding. No, I don't think so. She didn't like having her picture taken. Ask your father if you're so curious. When I asked my father later that evening, he became uncharacteristically flustered. Your mother's grandmother? No pictures that I know of. Hey, have you finished that calculus homework yet? I had chalked it up to parental disinterest in a school assignment, but now the memory returned with new significance. 5 weeks after mailing the sample, I received an email notification that my results were ready. I had just returned from a particularly exhausting day photographing a wedding, and it was nearly midnight. My finger hovered over the link, suddenly hesitant. Once I opened this, there would be no going back to the comfortable uncertainty I'd lived with my entire life. I poured myself a glass of wine, took a deep breath, and clicked the link. The website loaded slowly, displaying a colorful wheel breaking down my ethnic heritage. I stared at it, blinking in confusion. According to these results, I was 48% Italian, 30% Greek, 15% North African, and 7% Eastern European. There wasn't a trace of the British and German heritage that supposedly dominated my family's background. My first thought was that there must be a mistake, a lab error or sample mix-up. But as I scrolled down the page, another section caught my eye: DNA relatives. The site had identified several second and third cousins I'd never heard of, which wasn't particularly surprising. What was shocking was the close relative match at the top of the list: Diana Williams, predicted relationship, half-sibling. A message from this Diana had already been sent to my account. "Hello, I see we're closely related. I don't recognize your name. How are we connected? I'd love to learn more about our family connection." The room seemed to spin around me. Half-sibling? That wasn't possible. I only had one sibling. Madison. Unless. My mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Could one of us be adopted? Was there a sister my parents had never told us about? Or was my father not actually my biological father? I stayed up until 4 a.m. that night, diving deeper into the DNA results, researching the accuracy of these tests, and crying intermittently as the implications began to sink in. Around 2 a.m., I broke down and called Allison. "The test results came back," I said when she answered groggily. "Something's wrong." I explained the results through tears, my words tumbling out in a confused rush. Allison listened silently until I finished. "Oh, Lily," she said finally. "I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I keep thinking it must be a mistake, but it would explain so much. Why I've always looked different, why I've always felt like I don't belong." "Are you going to confront your parents?" "I think I need to. But first, I want to know more. There's a woman who came up as a likely half-sibling. I think I'm going to contact her." After a few hours of fitful sleep, I woke up feeling oddly calm. The initial shock had given way to a determined need for answers. I drafted a careful response to Diana Williams. "Hello Diana, I'm as surprised by this match as you are. I'd like to learn more about our possible connection. Could you tell me about your family? Particularly your mother's name and where you grew up." I'm trying to make sense of these unexpected results. While waiting for her response, I began searching online for information about Diana Williams. There were too many matches to narrow it down without more details, but I did find myself studying the small profile picture on her DNA account. There was something hauntingly familiar about her features, the same olive skin and dark hair that had made me feel like an outsider in my blonde, blue-eyed family. Diana's response came that afternoon. "Hi Lily, this is all very exciting. My mother's name is Catherine Williams. I'm 27 years old and grew up in Chicago with my mother and stepfather. My mother moved there from your city back in 1992. I never knew my biological father. Could we possibly share a father? Let me know if any of this rings a bell. Catherine Williams." The name triggered a vague memory, something overheard at a family gathering years ago. An argument between my parents where that name was mentioned, quickly hushed when they realized I was nearby. I began searching for Catherine Williams online and found her easily, a real estate agent in Chicago with a professional website featuring her photograph. The resemblance was unmistakable. We had the same heart-shaped face, the same slight wave to our dark hair. With shaking hands, I dug deeper, searching for any connection between Catherine Williams and my father. It took hours of searching through old social media posts and local news archives, but finally, I found it, a small mention in a community newspaper from 33 years ago about a legal aid clinic where Robert Bennett had volunteered. In the grainy photograph, my father stood next to a much younger Catherine Williams, identified as a paralegal at the same clinic. They had known each other. They had worked together around the time I would have been conceived. I sat back in my chair, feeling as though the air had been knocked out of me. The pieces were coming together to form a picture I could no longer deny. My father had had an affair with Catherine Williams, and I was the result. The woman who had raised me, Eleanor Bennett, was not my biological mother. It explained everything: my different appearance, the tensions in our family, Madison's status as the favored child. She was their biological daughter in a way that I was not. After a sleepless night wrestling with this new reality, I decided that I couldn't wait any longer for answers. I needed to hear the truth from my parents directly. Without calling ahead, I gathered my DNA results, the photograph from the newspaper, and drove to their house the next morning. I arrived at my parents' house just after 10 in the morning, a time when I knew they would both be home but not expecting visitors. My hands trembled slightly as I rang the doorbell, clutching a folder containing the printouts of my DNA results and the old newspaper clipping. My mother answered, surprise quickly giving way to pleasure at seeing me. "Lily. What a nice surprise. Come in, I just made coffee." "Is Dad home?" I asked, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "He's in his study." "Is everything all right? You look pale." "I need to talk to both of you," I said, following her inside. "It's important." She called my father, and we gathered in the living room. I sat across from them, the coffee my mother had poured for me untouched on the table between us. "What's this about, Lily?" my father asked, his eyes darting to the folder in my hands. "Is everything okay with your business?" Without speaking, I opened the folder and placed the DNA test results on the coffee table, turning them so my parents could see. My mother squinted at the paper, then reached for her reading glasses. As she processed what she was seeing, all color drained from her face. "What is this?" she whispered. "Madison gave me a DNA test for my birthday," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Remember? Her little joke about finding out where I really came from?" My father had gone very still, his face hardening into an expression I couldn't read. "This is nonsense," he said firmly. "Those tests are notoriously unreliable. A complete waste of money." I laid down the second printout, the message exchange with Diana Williams, and finally, the newspaper clipping showing him with Catherine Williams. "Is it nonsense, Dad?" "Because I've been in touch with my half-sister Diana. Her mother is Catherine Williams. You worked with her at the legal aid clinic 33 years ago." My father's face crumpled, and he slumped back into his chair, suddenly looking much older than his 65 years. My mother made a small, strangled sound and covered her mouth with her hand. "Robert," she said, her voice breaking. "Tell her it isn't true." But my father couldn't meet either of our eyes. The silence stretched for what felt like eternity before he finally spoke. "It was a difficult time in our marriage," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "We were having problems. Your mother and I, we weren't sure we would make it. Catherine was young, compassionate. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake." My mother was quietly crying now, tears streaming down her face as she stared at her husband of nearly 40 years. "How long?" I asked, my own emotions suspended in a strange, detached calm. "How long did the affair last?" 3 months, he admitted. It ended when Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She didn't want to break up a marriage. She was planning to move away, raise the child on her own without telling me. "But you knew," I pressed. "You knew she was pregnant?" He nodded slowly. "She felt I had a right to know, even if she didn't want anything from me. She told me just before she left town." I told your mother everything." I turned to my mother, whose face was a mask of grief and old pain. "You knew? All this time, you knew I wasn't biologically yours?" To my surprise, she reached across the table and gripped my hand fiercely. "You are mine," she said with sudden intensity. "In every way that matters, you are my daughter. Eleanor insisted we raise you as our own," my father continued. "Catherine agreed to terminate her parental rights. She moved away before you were born. We adopted you legally, but privately. No one knew except our lawyer. We agreed we would never tell anyone, not you, not Madison, not even our parents." "But Catherine didn't know," I said, the realization dawning on me. "She never knew she was actually pregnant with me when she moved away, did she? She thought she had a miscarriage or something." My father looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Of course she knew. She gave birth to you. She signed the adoption papers." I shook my head. "No, that's not possible. Diana told me her mother moved to Chicago in 1992, which is when I was already 5 years old. And Diana is 27, she was born 5 years after me. Catherine is her mother too. My parents exchanged a bewildered look. That can't be right, my father insisted. Catherine Williams definitely gave you up for adoption. I was there when the papers were signed. Then who is Diana talking about? She says we're half-siblings, and the DNA confirms it. We must share a biological parent. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. Finally, my mother spoke in a hollow voice. Robert, did Catherine know she was pregnant when she left town? Or did you just assume? My father frowned. She said she was pregnant and was going to raise the baby alone. I told her I needed to take responsibility, that Eleanor and I wanted to raise the child. She agreed to the adoption. At least, that's what our lawyer told us. We never saw her again after the initial discussions. Everything was handled through him. What was the lawyer's name? I asked, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Gerald Hoffman. He's long retired now. I pulled out my phone and did a quick search. Gerald Hoffman was disbarred in 1998 for numerous ethics violations, including falsifying adoption documents and taking payments to arrange questionable adoptions. The blood drained from my father's face. That's not possible. We did everything legally. We have your birth certificate, the adoption papers. Which would be easy to fake if Catherine never actually gave birth to me. Dad, I think you need to consider the possibility that Gerald Hoffman lied to you both. That he arranged for you to adopt a baby, me, that wasn't actually Catherine's child. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Then whose child are you? I don't know, I admitted. But I think Catherine Williams is still my biological father's daughter's mother, which would make Diana my half-sister through him. We need to talk to Catherine. My father stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to us, shoulders hunched. All these years, he murmured. All these years of guilt and secrecy, and it was all based on a lie? My mother was watching me with tear-filled eyes. Does this change how you feel about us, Lily? About being our daughter? The question caught me off guard. Did it change things? I wasn't biologically related to my mother as I'd always believed, but I also wasn't the product of my father's affair as I'd just assumed. I was someone else entirely. A stranger with unknown origins who had been brought into their lives. I don't know how I feel, I answered truthfully. I need time to process all of this. But right now, I need answers more than anything. And I think we need to tell Madison. Both my parents stiffened at that. No, my father said sharply. Madison doesn't need to know any of this. She gave me the DNA test, Dad. She's the reason we're having this conversation right now. And she's my sister, she deserves to know the truth too. Half-sister, my mother corrected automatically, then looked horrified at herself. I didn't mean. It's fine, I said, though it wasn't. Biologically, yes, Madison is my half-sister at most, possibly not related to me at all. But we were raised as sisters, and she has a right to know what's happening. My parents exchanged a look loaded with decades of shared secrets and unspoken fears. Finally, my father nodded reluctantly. We'll tell her together, he conceded. But not today. We all need some time to come to terms with this first. I shook my head firmly. No more delays, no more secrets. I'm calling her right now. Before either of them could object further, I pulled out my phone and dialed Madison's number. When she answered, I kept my voice calm and controlled. Madison, I need you to come to Mom and Dad's house right now. It's an emergency family meeting. What? Why? I'm busy, Lily. I have a lunch meeting in an hour. Cancel it. This is more important. It's about the DNA test you gave me. There was a pause. Oh. Did you actually do it? Find anything interesting? The smug amusement in her voice made my jaw clench. Just get here, Madison. Now. I ended the call and looked at my parents, who both seemed shell-shocked and aged a decade in the last hour. We have a lot to figure out, but first, we're going to put all the cards on the table. No more secrets in this family. The next hour passed in tense silence as we waited for Madison to arrive. My mother made tea that no one drank, and my father alternated between pacing and sitting with his head in his hands. I used the time to message Diana again, explaining that I needed to speak with her mother urgently and asking if she would be willing to connect us. She responded almost immediately with Catherine's contact information, adding that her mother was extremely interested in speaking with me as well. When the doorbell finally rang, my father looked like a man walking to his execution as he went to let Madison Indiana. Madison breezed into the living room, immaculately dressed in a designer suit, radiating impatience. This better be important. I had to reschedule a meeting with our biggest client. She stopped short when she saw our faces, her expression shifting from annoyed to concerned. What's going on? Is someone sick? Sit down, Madison, my father said quietly, gesturing to the armchair across from me. She hesitated, then perched on the edge of the seat, her handbag still clutched in her lap as if ready for a quick exit. You're scaring me. What's this about? I took a deep breath. I did the DNA test you gave me for my birthday. A flash of something, embarrassment? Regret, crossed her face before she composed herself. Oh. That was just a joke, Lily. You didn't have to actually do it. Well, I did. And the results were unexpected. My parents remained silent, leaving me to explain. I walked Madison through what we had discovered, my surprising ethnic background, the connection to Diana Williams, the revelation about our father's affair with Catherine, and the growing suspicion that I had been part of a fraudulent adoption arranged by a now disbarred lawyer. As I spoke, Madison's expression cycled through disbelief, shock, and finally, a cold anger I had never seen before. When I finished, she turned to our parents. Is this true? She demanded. Have you been lying to us our entire lives? My father couldn't meet her eyes. It's complicated, Madison. Complicated, she echoed, her voice rising. You had an affair, got a woman pregnant, then raised that child, who isn't even hers after all, as part of our family without telling anyone? How is that complicated? It's a lie. A massive, life-altering lie. We thought we were doing what was best, my mother said weakly. We wanted to keep our family together. By building it on deception? Madison stood up, pacing the room. Do you have any idea what this means? My entire childhood was a sham. All those times you made me share with Lily, include Lily, be nice to Lily, she wasn't even my real sister. Madison, my mother gasped. No, let her speak, I said quietly. Let's get it all out in the open. Madison whirled to face me. Don't act so calm and understanding. This affects you even more than it affects me. You're the one who doesn't know who you really are. You're right, I acknowledged. I don't. But I do know who I've been for the past 32 years, your sister, their daughter. That part wasn't a lie, even if the biological connection was. How can you say that? Everything was a lie. Madison's voice broke, and for the first time since we were children, I saw tears in her eyes. Did you know? She demanded of our parents. All these years, did you know Lily wasn't really, that she was adopted? My father finally looked up, his face haggard. We knew she wasn't biologically your mother's child. We thought she was mine with Catherine. The adoption was supposed to be legitimate, just private. We never suspected. So you lied to protect your reputation, Madison said flatly. To cover up your affair. It wasn't like that, my mother interjected. We were trying to save our marriage, to create a family. A family? Madison laughed bitterly. Is that why you always favored me? Because I was your real daughter and Lily was just a reminder of Dad's infidelity? A heavy silence fell over the room. It was a question I had never dared to ask but had wondered my entire life. Madison, that's not fair, my father began, but my mother interrupted him. No, she's right to ask. My mother's voice was steady despite the tears on her face. The truth is, in the beginning, it was hard for me. Looking at Lily, thinking she was the product of my husband's betrayal, there were times I struggled. But I did love you, Lily. I do love you. But not the same way you loved Madison, I said softly. I tried to be fair. You failed, Madison said unexpectedly, coming to my defense. You both failed. You favored me to compensate for your guilt, Dad. And Mom, you kept Lily at a distance because it hurt too much to fully embrace her. And in the process, you turned us against each other. She turned to me, her anger momentarily directed away from me and toward our parents. Do you remember when we were kids, and Dad would always praise me for the smallest accomplishment but barely acknowledge your achievements? I thought it was because he loved me more. I used it against you. I didn't realize he was overcompensating because of his guilt. And I resented you for it, I admitted. For being the favorite. For belonging in a way I never did. Madison sank back into her chair, suddenly deflated. So my entire identity as the golden child was just Dad's guilty conscience. And all those times Mom pushed us to be close, insisting we wear matching outfits and go to the same activities, it was just to maintain the illusion that we were normal sisters. We were trying to do what was right, my father insisted. We loved you both. We still do. Love isn't enough when it's built on lies, Madison said, standing up abruptly. I need some air. I need to. I can't be here right now. Before any of us could respond, she grabbed her purse and strode out of the house, letting the front door slam behind her. The three of us sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of decades of secrets hanging heavy in the air. She'll come around, my father said finally, sounding more hopeful than convinced. Will she? I asked. Will any of us? Everything we thought we knew about our family has been turned upside down. Nothing is what we believed it to be. You're still our daughter, my mother insisted. Both of you are still our daughters. I looked at her, this woman who had raised me, tucked me in at night, attended my school plays, taught me to drive, and felt a complicated mix of love, hurt, and newfound understanding. I know, Mom. But right now, I think we all need some time to process this. I'm going to contact Catherine Williams. I need to understand what really happened. My father looked alarmed. Lily, I don't think that's a good idea. There are legal implications to consider. I'm 32 years old, Dad. Whatever fraud may have occurred in my adoption happened decades ago. The statute of limitations has long passed. This isn't about legal liability, it's about the truth. I gathered my things and stood to leave. Unlike Madison's dramatic exit, I took a moment to hug both my parents before going. Whatever anger and betrayal I felt was tempered by the realization that they, too, had been victims of deception. I'll call you tomorrow, I promised. We'll figure this out, but no more secrets. From now on, we deal with the truth, however complicated it might be. As I drove home, I felt strangely calm. The initial shock had given way to a sense of clarity I hadn't expected. For the first time in my life, the feeling of being different, of not belonging, made sense. It wasn't in my head, it was reality. And somehow, naming it, understanding it, made it less painful than the lifetime of unspoken doubt had been. That night, I emailed Catherine Williams, introducing myself and explaining what we had discovered. I asked if she would be willing to meet with me, to help piece together what had really happened all those years ago. Her response came just an hour later. Lily, I've been waiting 32 years to meet you. Yes, absolutely yes. Name the time and place. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt as though one chapter of my life had closed, and another, more honest one was just beginning. 3 days after the confrontation at my parents' house, I sat in a quiet corner booth at Café Margot, a neutral location I had chosen for meeting Catherine Williams and her daughter Diana. I had arrived 30 minutes early, too anxious to sit at home waiting, and had already consumed 2 cups of tea while watching the door. When they walked in at exactly 2 p.m., I recognized them immediately. Catherine was in her early 60s, elegant with silver-streaked dark hair and the same olive complexion I had. Diana, at 27, could have been my younger sister. We shared the same heart-shaped face, wavy dark hair, and hazel eyes. Seeing my features reflected in these strangers was both unsettling and oddly comforting. I stood as they approached, my heart racing. Catherine stopped a few feet away, her hand covering her mouth, tears already forming in her eyes. "Lily," she said softly. "You look so much like my mother." That simple observation, linking me to a grandmother I'd never known, hit me with unexpected force. For the first time since receiving the DNA results, I felt tears welling up. Without thinking, I stepped forward, and Catherine embraced me, holding me as though I might disappear if she let go. "I never knew," she whispered. "Please believe me, I never knew about you." We separated after a long moment, both wiping away tears. Diana stood nearby, smiling through her own tears. "The family resemblance is uncanny," she said, stepping forward to hug me as well. "It's like looking at a slightly older version of myself." We settled into the booth, ordering coffee and pastries that would go largely untouched as we navigated the emotional conversation ahead. "I don't even know where to begin," Catherine said, studying my face. "There's so much to say, so many years to account for." "Start with what happened between you and my father," I suggested. "The affair, and what came after." Catherine nodded, taking a deep breath. "Robert and I worked together at the legal aid clinic in 1990. I was young, just out of paralegal school. He was charming, accomplished, seemed to take my career seriously when others didn't. His marriage was struggling, at least that's what he told me." She looked down at her coffee. "The affair lasted about 3 months. When I realized what I was doing, helping a married man cheat on his wife, I ended it. It wasn't who I wanted to be." "Were you pregnant when you ended it?" I asked. "No," she said firmly. "At least, I didn't think so." About a month after ending things with Robert, I started feeling unwell. Before I could confirm a pregnancy, I experienced what I thought was a very heavy period. The doctor later told me it was likely an early miscarriage. She paused, visibly emotional. I never told Robert about it. I was already planning to leave town, start fresh somewhere else. I moved to Chicago 2 months later and never looked back. I met Diana's father a few years after that. "But my father claims you agreed to give me up for adoption," I said, confused. "That his lawyer handled everything." Catherine's expression hardened. "That's impossible. I never gave birth in 1991. I never signed adoption papers. Whatever arrangement your father made, it had nothing to do with me." "The lawyer's name was Gerald Hoffman," Diana interjected. "We looked him up. He was disbarred for illegal adoption schemes." Catherine paled. "Gerald Hoffman?" "He was a regular at the legal clinic. Always offering to help the young women who came in with problems. I remember thinking he was unusually interested in pregnant clients." The pieces were starting to come together. "So you think Hoffman connected my father with a pregnant woman, someone else entirely, and arranged for them to adopt her baby?" "Me? It seems the most likely explanation," Catherine said gently. "I'm so sorry, Lily. This must be incredibly difficult for you." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and relief. Disappointment that I was still no closer to knowing my biological origins, but relief that Catherine hadn't willingly abandoned me. "The DNA test confirmed that Diana and I are half-siblings," I said. "Which means we must share a biological parent." Catherine nodded slowly. "Since I'm definitely Diana's mother, and I definitely didn't give birth to you. It means my biological father is Diana's father," I finished. "Not Robert Bennett." Diana reached across the table to take my hand. "My father, our father, passed away 5 years ago. His name was James Williams. He was a kind man, a high school history teacher. Did he ever mention anything that might suggest he knew about me? I asked hesitantly. Diana shook her head. No, but there's something you should know. Before he met my mother, he donated to a sperm bank during his graduate school years. It was common among students who needed extra money. I sat back, processing this new information. So I could be the result of his sperm donation? That would explain our DNA match. It's possible, Catherine acknowledged. Gerald Hoffman might have arranged for your parents to adopt a child born from donor sperm, possibly your father's. The timing would work. James made those donations in the late 1980s. My head was spinning with the implications. If this theory was correct, I wasn't biologically related to either of the parents who raised me. I was the child of a sperm donor who never knew I existed and a woman I might never identify. Do you have photos? I asked suddenly. Of James? Catherine's expression softened. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, scrolling through before handing it to me. This was taken about a year before he died. The man in the photo had the same eyes as mine, as Diana's. The same slightly crooked smile that I saw every day in the mirror. Something shifted inside me, a piece of the puzzle clicking into place. He looks like me, I whispered. He does, Diana agreed. I noticed it the moment I saw your profile picture on the DNA website. We spent the next 2 hours sharing photos and stories. Catherine had brought a small family album, showing me pictures of Diana growing up, of James at various ages, of Catherine's parents, my possible biological grandparents. For the first time in my life, I saw my features reflected in other people's faces. The shape of my eyes in James's face, the curve of my jawline in Diana's, the way Catherine gestured with her hands exactly as I did. As we talked, I found myself liking these people who were strangers yet somehow familiar. Diana was warm and enthusiastic, an elementary school art teacher with the same creative inclinations I had. Catherine was thoughtful and direct, asking questions about my life with genuine interest. I wish we had known about you, Catherine said at one point. James would have wanted to know his daughter. Even if I was just the result of a sperm donation? I asked. Especially then, Catherine assured me. James believed that all connections were meaningful, whether made by blood or choice. It's why he donated in the first place, he wanted to help create families. As our meeting drew to a close, Catherine reached into her bag one last time and pulled out a small box. This was my mother's, she said, placing it in my hands. It's a silver locket that's been passed down through the women in our family for generations. I was going to give it to Diana on her 30th birthday, but I think my mother would have wanted you to have it. I opened the box to find a delicate silver locket on a thin chain. Inside was a tiny black and white photo of a woman who looked remarkably like me. That's Sophia, my mother, Catherine explained. Your grandmother. I can't accept this, I protested, overwhelmed by the gesture. You barely know me. Your family, Catherine said simply. Whether through James's donation or some other connection we haven't figured out yet, we're connected. And family heirlooms should stay in the family. As I fastened the locket around my neck, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Madison. Can we talk? Just the two of us. Please. I showed the message to Diana and Catherine, explaining the complicated situation with my sister. You should go, Diana encouraged. This is just our first meeting, not our last. We have time to get to know each other. We exchanged hugs and promises to meet again soon. As I watched them walk away, the silver locket warm against my skin, my phone buzzed again with another message from Madison. I'm sorry. I need my sister right now. Despite everything, those words still had the power to touch me. Whatever genetic truth the DNA test had revealed, Madison and I had shared a lifetime of memories. That counted for something. I texted back, tomorrow, noon, at the park where we used to play as kids. Just us. The playground at Franklin Park was nearly empty when I arrived the next day, just a few young mothers watching toddlers on the swings. This park had been a central part of our childhood, the place where Madison had taught me to do a cartwheel, where we'd shared ice cream cones on summer evenings, where we'd fought and made up countless times before adolescence drove us in different directions. Madison was already there, sitting on a bench overlooking the duck pond. She looked different somehow, dressed down in jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, none of the polished perfection she usually projected. When she saw me approaching, she stood awkwardly, as if unsure whether to hug me or keep her distance. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. I nodded, taking a seat on the bench and gesturing for her to join me. For a moment, we sat in silence, watching a mother duck lead her ducklings across the water. "I'm sorry," Madison finally said, staring straight ahead. "For the DNA test. For how I reacted when we found out the truth. For a lot of things." "You didn't know what the test would show," I pointed out. "That's not the point." She turned to face me. "I gave it to you to be cruel. To emphasize how different you were, how you didn't belong. I've been doing that our entire lives, and I never stopped to ask myself why." Her honesty surprised me. Madison had always been defensive, quick to justify her actions or deflect blame. "Why did you?" I asked quietly. She was quiet for a long moment. "Jealousy, I think." As bizarre as that might sound. "Jealousy? Of me?" I couldn't hide my disbelief. "Madison, you were always the favorite. You had everything: looks, popularity, our parents' approval, academic success. What could you possibly have been jealous of?" "Your freedom," she said simply. "Your courage to pursue what you loved, even when it didn't match what our parents wanted. The way you carved out your own identity instead of constantly trying to be what everyone expected." She sighed heavily. "Do you know how exhausting it is to be perfect all the time? To feel like one mistake, one failure would bring everything crashing down? You found your passion in photography and pursued it regardless of what anyone thought. I became a marketing executive because it was prestigious and lucrative and would make our parents proud, even though I wanted to study marine biology. This was news to me." "You never mentioned being interested in marine biology." "Because Dad laughed when I brought it up in high school. Said it wasn't a real career path." She shrugged. "After that, I stopped talking about it. Doubled down on business classes instead." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "I always thought you had it all figured out." "I had what our parents wanted figured out," she corrected. "Not what I wanted." We lapsed into silence again, the weight of missed connections and misunderstandings between us. "I met Catherine and Diana yesterday," I said finally. "My biological father's ex-wife and daughter. We're half-siblings through him." Madison nodded slowly. "So Dad isn't your biological father either?" "No. It seems like the lawyer who arranged my adoption was running some kind of illegal operation. Catherine never gave me up, she didn't even know about me. We think I might be the result of a sperm donation." "That's a lot to process." "Tell me about it," I agreed with a hollow laugh. Madison hesitated, then asked, "What are they like?" "Your biological family?" "They're nice. Normal. Diana is an art teacher. We look alike, it's a bit surreal, honestly." "And what about us?" Madison asked, an unfamiliar vulnerability in her voice. "What happens to our family now?" The question caught me off guard. With all the focus on discovering my biological origins, I hadn't fully considered what it meant for my relationship with the family that raised me. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm still trying to figure that out. But I do know that biology isn't everything. We grew up together, Madison. Whatever our genetic relationship, we shared a childhood. That counts for something. Even though I was awful to you for most of it?" Her voice cracked slightly. "We were both products of our environment. Mom and Dad created a dynamic that pitted us against each other, even if they didn't mean to. And now we know why." Madison wiped away a tear. I keep thinking about how different things might have been if they'd just been honest from the beginning. If we'd grown up knowing you were adopted, if I hadn't been raised to believe I was somehow superior. We can't change the past, I said gently. But maybe we can build something better going forward. Something based on honesty. She nodded, then surprised me by reaching out to take my hand. I'd like that. I've missed having a sister, Lily. A real relationship, not the competitive mess we've had. Me too, I admitted. We spent the next hour talking more openly than we had in years, perhaps ever. Madison told me about the struggles in her seemingly perfect marriage, her concerns about being the same kind of mother to her children that our mother had been to us. I shared my recent discoveries and my uncertainty about how to integrate my newfound biological family into my life. You should introduce me to Diana, Madison suggested as we prepared to leave. I'd like to meet what would she be to me? Step-half-sister-in-law once removed? I offered with a smile. Family labels get complicated in situations like ours. How about just friend? We can start there. A week later, I arranged a brief, casual meeting between Madison and Diana at a local coffee shop. It was awkward at first, both women unsure of how to relate to each other, but by the end, they were exchanging phone numbers and making tentative plans to get together again. The following months brought more adjustments and healing. My parents agreed to family therapy, where we began the difficult work of rebuilding trust and establishing new, healthier dynamics. My father, particularly, seemed determined to make amends, acknowledging the ways his guilt had shaped his parenting and working to develop more authentic relationships with both Madison and me. My mother struggled more with the integration of Catherine into my life, initially viewing her as a threat. But as she came to understand that Catherine had been as much a victim of deception as anyone, her defensiveness gradually gave way to a cautious acceptance. 6 months after the DNA test revelation, we attempted our first blended family Thanksgiving dinner. My parents hosted, inviting Catherine and Diana to join our traditional celebration. Madison and James brought the children, who were delighted to discover a new aunt and grandmother and showed none of the awkwardness the adults still sometimes felt. There were tense moments, my mother stiffening when Emma asked Catherine about her childhood, my father becoming overly solicitous in his attempts to make everyone comfortable. But there were beautiful moments too, Diana and I discovering we had the same unusual laugh, Catherine sharing family recipes that explained my inexplicable love for certain spices, Madison's children drawing a family tree that included every person at the table, branches connecting in unconventional patterns that somehow made perfect sense to them. As we gathered around the dinner table, I found myself taking stock of how far we had come. The path to this moment had been painful, filled with revelations that had shaken us to our core. But from that upheaval had come a kind of honesty and authenticity that had been missing from our family for decades. After dinner, I stepped outside for some air and found myself thinking about identity, how we construct it, how we protect it, how we revise it when new information comes to light. 6 months ago, I had believed I knew who I was, even as I struggled with feeling like an outsider. Now, paradoxically, understanding how truly outside my biological origins were had helped me find a sense of belonging I'd never experienced before. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael, my ex-boyfriend. We had reconnected a few weeks earlier when I reached out to share everything that had happened. He had been surprised but supportive, and our conversations had gradually increased in frequency and depth. "How's the family gathering going?" he texted. "Still on for coffee tomorrow?" I smiled as I typed back a response, feeling a flutter of possibility that hadn't been there during our relationship. Now that I understood my own identity better, I found myself more open to connection, less afraid of letting others see the real me. As I headed back inside to rejoin my complex, imperfect, evolving family, I carried with me a new understanding: families are both born and made. Biology may provide connections, but it's the choices we make, to be honest, to forgive, to grow, to love, that truly create family bonds. The DNA test that was meant to mock me for being different had instead given me the greatest gift, the truth. And while truth can be painful, it can also be the foundation for something far stronger and more genuine than any comforting lie. Have you ever discovered an unexpected family secret? How did it change your relationships? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life family journeys. Remember, sometimes the hardest truths lead to the most meaningful connections. Thank you for listening, and may your own family journey, whatever its complexities, lead you to authenticity and peace.